Fast food and processed foods are destroying humanity, destructive to the world. We're seeing epidemics of diabetes and obesity all over the world today. And as we export the American way of life in fast food restaurants and eating processed foods out of bags and boxes, and we export, when people want to emulate what we do in America, and they're becoming bigger, larger, and more diabetic and high rates of cancer.
Diabetics, your heart disease risk is as high as people who've already had a heart attack, right? I mean, so the people at the highest risk are people that already had it and thankfully lived through it, but obviously they're high risk for heart disease. They have 100% risk, they have heart disease, they just suffered a heart attack, thankfully, and so you know their arteries are clogged and crippled and, you know, inflamed, and so you can't be at higher risk in that.
Hello and welcome back to I Thrive, rising from the depths of diabetes and obesity. I'm your host, John McMahon. I'm 120 pounds overweight, and that makes me morbidly obese. And I'm also type 2 diabetic with many of its complications, including advanced neuropathy. And I've been lucky to survive one silent diabetic heart attack. I certainly couldn't risk having another. I was feeling weaker and weaker, tired and hopeless, so I went on this mission to get my life back, and I produced this documentary series to inspire others that were stuck, like me, to do the same thing. Thank you for joining us for episode 104, Treating the Cause, Eating to Live, and Choosing to Thrive. In our last episode, we came face to face with the reality that diabetes, well, it's kind of like an iceberg, and we're all in the Titanic of the Western diet headed straight for it. Some will survive by chance, some won't. Others will get off that wreck and not only survive, but thrive, and we're going to lay the foundation for what that'll take in this episode. Up next, we'll hear from Dr. Barnard and Caldwell Esselstyn when they advised me regarding my heart, specifically a very important lining inside all my arteries. Then I'll face down Chef AJ and find out what to put in my mouth in order to thrive.
The risk of a heart attack for a person who's got type 2 diabetes, first of all, it's high for people who don't have type 2 diabetes on a standard American kind of diet. And if you have type 2 diabetes, that will greatly increase the risk. The risk goes up from about half of Americans dying of a heart attack to about 3/4 or more of people with type 2 diabetes dying of a heart attack.
And
you don't want it.
And the first symptom
of a heart attack?
Heart attacks?
Well, the first symptom of a lot of heart attacks is nothing. I mean, the lights go out. You had no warning whatsoever.
And I think now you can see that once a patient who has, let's say somebody has had a heart attack, and they now understand what I've said about the endothelial cell, they understand that it wasn't their genes, it wasn't their stress, it was the food that they were eating that trashed and injured the capacity of their endothelial cells to make nitric oxide. Once they get that, anybody with a brain in their head who's had a heart attack would say, well, wait a minute, I'm the one in control here. I'm being empowered to stop this disease that I don't know what's been causing it. That is the light goes on. They get it and get it right. Then I have a little fun with them. I must say that I have a chapter in my book that starts and says that moderation kills. Can you imagine somebody raising their hand and saying, well, Dr. Esselstyn, how about this little bit can't hurt? What? What are you telling me? I don't have a program that's 90 or 95%. If you were telling me that you were eating my program 90%, that means you're taking an endothelial cell train wreck, and 10% of the time you're making the train set Train wreck, even worse. How are we going to get recovery? Yeah. Or somebody, I ask, how often do you eat out? Oh, not very often. Let me try again. How often do you eat out? Well, maybe 2 or 3 times a week. Okay. What are those famous restaurants in Dallas known for the arrest and reversal of heart disease that you eat out at 3 times a week? Well, I said, let's think of it this way. 3 times a week, all right? That's 156 days out of 365 that you are still trashing and eating foods that are going to injure the endothelial cells, making the train wreck even worse. Now, I don't have a problem with your eating out, providing that you start off, look at the waiter or the waitress and say, look, I am deathly allergic to a single drop of any oil, okay? Then you can have some steamed vegetables, have a baked potato, you can have a salad, bring your own dressing, and some fruit for dessert. I don't have a problem with that. Look, there are 4 reasons to eat out. 1, you don't do the cooking. 2, you don't do the dishes. 3, the ambiance. 4, the companionship. You never go out to eat to further destroy more endothelial cells. It's interesting that, yeah, there's been a great rekindling of an interest in fat, but what we haven't seen is any strong, unflawed science that confirms that. For example, when you have all these studies for over a century showing how saturated fat is a problem and how animal products are a problem. I mean, for instance, in my work with patients with cardiovascular disease, we've talked already today about the importance of the endothelium. Animal protein ravages the animal endothelium. Dairy ravages the endothelium. Processed oils ravages the endothelium. What we haven't seen is in all these persons that want to push with all these high-fat and animal products, let's do this. Take a group of patients seriously ill with heart disease, give them bacon, all right? Give them whipped cream, give them red meat, and see if they can reverse their heart disease. What? Where is that? Instead of this veiled, flawed research is really, fortunately, been pretty well discounted by more scientific studies that are valid.
The body is like the mathematic concept of fractals, where the closer you look at, the more it breaks up into these smaller and smaller patterns. The body is just has layer upon layer of miraculous function in it. And the same thing is certainly evident when we look into the walls of our arteries. And there are doctors who just study the arterial tree for their entire career, angiologists. They're so complex. And one of the most exquisite part of these muscular tubes that carry the blood throughout our body is the very inner lining called the endothelial lining. It's only 1 cell thin, and it's silky, slick, it's gossamer, it's a satin lining that's, if you were to touch it, it would feel like the smoothest silk that you can imagine. And you want it nice and smooth so the blood cells flow across it without breaking up. And very importantly, the platelet cells in your blood slide right along and don't break up, because if they break up, they start off the clotting process, and you certainly don't want that to happen in your artery walls. And so you have this lovely molecularly smooth layer on the inside of your artery walls, and you want to keep it that pristine all your life as much as you can. But like so many other tissues in our body, we're not very gentle by and large with our endothelial lining. And we repeatedly put things into our bloodstream that injure the endothelial lining on a chemical level as the blood flows through the artery. I think most notorious, of course, cigarette smoke, full of free radicals and oxidizing agents, going to damage that endothelial artery. But how about eating a chili dog, where you got cooked animal protein, you've got the fried oils that the hot dog was grilled on. There's so many intense oxidizing agents. You drink it with a cola drink, so there's going to be sugar and phosphoric acid in your bloodstream running along the inside of the arteries. That's going to injure those endothelial linings. There's so much that we do. We're not gentle with this gossamer membrane at all. And it's an important membrane because this membrane creates a molecule called nitric oxide, and that penetrates into the deeper wall of the artery. Then it lets the artery relax. And this is very important because when you run for a bus, you need your arteries to dilate and open up to deliver more blood to your muscles. And it takes a healthy endothelial lining generating that nitric oxide that will allow those blood vessels to dilate. But if you've injured that endothelial lining from month after month, year after years, of cigarettes and hot dogs and alcohol and cola drinks and sugars and hydrogenated oil and fried foods and all this toxic brew of the standard Western diet, those cells can't produce the nitric oxide. The blood vessels don't dilate. They stay clamped down. That raises the blood pressure. That in turn pounds against these delicate tissues in your eyes and your kidneys and leads to kidney failure and heart attacks and dementia. This very delicate membrane is in a pivotal point in our health spectrum here that we really need to take care of. As much as you take care of your eyes, boy, you want to take care of the endothelial lining of your blood vessels. Those blood vessels love a whole food plant-based diet. They love those phytonutrients that are in the dark green leafy vegetables and the yellow vegetables. They love the sulforaphanes and the various phenols and plant-based substances that are stabilizing. As they slide across the endothelial lining, they give the chemical message to the tissues, shh, calm down, everything's okay, everybody's nice and stable and strong. That's the chemical message that you want delivered to your lining of your blood vessels. And that's what a whole food, plant-based diet with lentil stews and vegetable soups and salads and steamed vegetables, and that's what we're talking about here. That delivers a stabilizing, healing message to your artery walls and will keep them functioning in a healthy manner all your life.
So I'm doing research into nutrition, diet, lifestyle, and I see I get articles in my news feed. I see what's on the internet. I see what's on the television. I go to the bookstores and magazines, and I get a lot of information, and it's confusing. There's a sea of it. And some of it's directly conflicting. Some says, eat. Like I remember one. It was Dr. McCullough's site. Eat like 85% fat. and then the rest, like almost no carbohydrates, and then a little, the rest protein. And then another one is paleo. It's a little bit in between, and don't eat legumes or fruit or nuts. And then another one is just grains. No grains, and then you've got whole food plant based, and so it's kind of confusing for me. Just kind of go through.
Well, I think it's confusing for everybody, and they're in conflict with each other because you can't be on both a low fat diet and a high fat diet at the same time. I think a lot of times if people can test them out for themselves and see what works for them. But the thing is we know that a whole food plant based diet, a low fat whole food plant based diet, it never doesn't work. I hope you're interviewing Dr. Alan Goldhammer because he's the co-founder of the True North Health Center. He's been there for over 32 years, and he's never seen this diet not work, whether it's in reversing diabetes or heart disease or high blood pressure or autoimmune disease. The thing is are people able to implement it? That's the whole thing. And there is research that proves it does work. But as John McDougall has said, people always want good news about their bad habits, and people want to be able to eat crap food because it gets them high, it makes them feel good, all the dopamine from eating fast food and all that kind of stuff. So, it's not sexy, it's not really marketable eating fruits and vegetables, but that's what's going to cure people.
I've never even heard of the endothelial lining, and I've been ravaging it my whole life. This was not looking good. My personal takeaway from Chef was that a whole food, plant-based diet never doesn't work. That is not what I wanted to hear. I wanted to hear that it turns out my favorite breakfast, bacon, eggs, and avocado, was the fountain of youth. Up next, let's see what Mike Adams, the health ranger from Natural Foods, advice is.
Here's one of the most powerful pieces of advice I can give anybody who is dealing with diabetes and doesn't know what to do. It's very simple. Find 5 people you know who are diabetic and who are taking diabetes drugs and ask about their outcomes. Look at how they feel. Look at their energy levels, their perhaps lack of vibrancy. Find out what they're doing and ask yourself, is that the outcome you want? And then go find 5 people who live a healthy, holistic lifestyle. People who do juicing, people who eat superfoods, people who do some moderate exercise, and then look at their outcomes. People who don't take pharmaceuticals. Find out what they're all about, and then simply ask yourself, which outcome do you want? Because you can have any outcome you want. You can live a life of drug dependency and suffering and diabetic neuropathy. You can be in and out of doctor's offices forever. You can have a leg amputated if it gets that bad. Yeah, that's a life you can choose. But why would you? Why would you choose that when you have this other choice that's readily available? The choice of holistic nutrition, healing of foods, minerals, choice of simple exercise, of avoiding toxic processed foods and sodium nitrite and other toxic ingredients. You can have the life you choose. Just look at people out there who are living these 2 different lives and ask yourself which one you want. Because it's your choice which one you want to have. You can either make the drug companies rich, or you can make your future rich. It's your choice. If you really break down food into its purposes in your body, you have these macronutrients that you need for energy and tissue. Those are the carbohydrates, oils, and proteins, right? But aside from that, what else is food? Well, food is medicine. So you have these tens of thousands of what are called phytochemicals or phytonutrients that are found in everything from blueberries to chlorella to red peppers. They're very abundant in the plant world. So vegans get a lot of these nutrients, everything from anthocyanidins in grape seeds, let's say, to catechins in green tea, or every pigment in a food is a natural medicine. What turns blueberries blue or purple is medicine. So eggplant has medicine in it. Every plant has medicine in it, without exception. You could, if you could concentrate, if you could extract all that medicine from all the plants and put it into one little pill, you could literally survive and flourish on one tiny pill per day, plus the carbohydrates, oils, and proteins, fats and proteins. But the medicine that you need could be condensed to that small amount. The problem is nobody offers such a thing, so your body has to extract those nutrients from the plant world. You are a giant juicing machine. Your digestion is a juice extraction process. So yeah, you're getting carbohydrates and fats and proteins from lots of different foods. That's easy. But where are you getting the medicine? These are medicines that are antibacterial, that are anti-diabetic, that are anti-cancer, that protect brain function and cognitive function. Those have to be extracted from the plant world. So that's why you need to eat lots of different fruits, lots of different vegetables and roots and so on. Turmeric, ginger, onions, celery, lemons, limes, all these things, because that's where you're getting all these very rare, very tiny medicinal molecules that you have to extract from these plants. This is why digestive health is key to all of this. And probiotics, we didn't really talk about yet. Probiotics are the secret to unlocking the extraction of these medicines from these plants. So if you don't have the right probiotics living in your gut, and they're doing a lot of the work, they're opening cell walls and pulling out nutrients and delivering them to your bloodstream. They're transforming certain nutrients. They're making medicine inside your gut in many cases. If you don't have the right probiotics, you're eating plants, but it's just passing through you. You're not getting the medicine out. That's why if you take antibiotics, it makes you sick, because it kills all those organisms living in your gut that are functioning as the juice extractors for the natural medicine in all of these plants, those natural medicines that you need to prevent disease.
I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when I was 12 years old. So my older brother had type 1 diabetes before me. And so I knew of the condition, and I had been complaining to my mom for several weeks that I was thirsty all the time and had to go to the bathroom all the time. And I'm like, Mom, I think I have type 1 diabetes like Steve. And she's like, no, don't be silly. So my parents, we were living in Minnesota at the time, and my parents fly to Florida because they were looking at houses. We were going to move to Florida. And my mom calls to check in and see how are things going. And I said, Mom, I couldn't sleep last night. I'm cramping. She's like, okay, go upstairs, use your brother's blood glucose meter and see what your blood glucose is. So I test myself and I'm over 400. And my brother says, you know what, you have type 1 diabetes, pack your bags, you're gonna be in the hospital for a few days. So my parents fly back that night. I only had to spend one day in the hospital because my family knew what to do. And then that was it. That was the beginning of type 1 diabetes, and slowly I started to learn about new lifestyle habits. And basically I stumbled across a book that planted a seed in my mind that I could reverse type 1 diabetes. And there's really no way known to reverse type 1 diabetes. So I was telling myself, look, everybody told Roger Bannister that you cannot run a 4-minute mile. The smartest people in the world said your heart will explode, you cannot do it. And then Roger Bannister proved that it could be done, and then people started to do it. It's no big deal now to run a 4-minute mile. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna figure out how it's done. So I just went on a journey to try and learn as much as I could. And every time I learned something new, I was like, okay, I'm just gonna do it. I'm gonna do whatever I can to be the healthiest I can and give my body the chance to heal itself and regenerate new beta cells. So that eventually led me to the low-fat, plant-based whole food diet. And for the past 10 years, I've literally eaten nothing but fruits and vegetables in their natural state. So I tried several diets in the journey to getting where I was now. And I tried the Weston A. Price Foundation diet. That was grass-fed dairy, grass-fed beef, and stuff like that. And it didn't really go that well. And then I eventually came across a plant-based version of a low-carb diet. I tried a Gabriel Cousens style approach. And this is where I'm eating basically oil, nuts and seeds, and lots of greens. So it was the phase 1 part of the program, no fruit and stuff like that. And eventually I followed it, and I was taking the least amount of total insulin that I've ever taken. But my energy was terrible, and I was eating very little carbohydrate, and it just didn't go well. So I kept on learning, okay, what do I do next? What do I do next? And eventually I came across the low-fat, plant-based whole food diet. I started doing that. My energy was incredible, and I felt amazing. My insulin sensitivity is incredible. I just kept on sticking with it. The personal experience that I have had in my own body, and just the quality of life that I get. So people talk about living well so they can have a long life, and that's great. I want that too. But my quality of life right now on a day-to-day basis is so high, I just want to share that with other people and make sure other people have the information. There is so much misinformation around diabetes, and to hear people, the number of times I hear people think that they cannot eat fruit because they have diabetes, it drives me nuts. So I'm like, okay, what do I got to do to get this information out there so people can know this is an option? We're trying to raise awareness that you can follow a low-fat, plant-based whole food diet, reverse insulin resistance, which gets rid of prediabetes and type 2 diabetes, and makes type 1 diabetes a heck of a lot easier to manage and reduces your risk of all the chronic diseases associated with type 1 diabetes. So the number one killer of people living with diabetes is heart disease. And our approach can make people heart attack proof, as I'm sure you've heard Dr. Esselstyn say. And that's, so now I'm passionate about it and do everything I can to educate people. And we have a coaching program where we walk people through adopting this lifestyle one day at a time. So people living with type 1 diabetes, a very popular approach is to limit your carbohydrate intake to roughly 30 grams per day. And if you do that, you can have a flat line blood glucose and you can take very small amounts of insulin and life is good. The problem I have with that is that yes, you get good diabetes numbers, you get type 1 diabetes under control, but your energy, quality of life, and chance of getting heart disease goes through the roof because you're living with insulin resistance at that point. So I personally eat well over 700 grams of carbohydrate per day and consume I intake roughly 40 total units of insulin. That's including long-acting and short-acting insulin. And so that's terrific insulin sensitivity, which I'm very happy about. And I enjoy my food, I love it. And we have clients having the same results. People come to us and they're trying a low carbohydrate diet, and they come to us and their total insulin intake oftentimes goes down, while their carbohydrate intake goes up by 4-fold, 5-fold, 6-fold, and that's a sign of dramatic increase in insulin sensitivity.
Well, then it must not be the carbohydrates that I'm used to eating and seeing.
I'm glad you asked that. So yes, again, we are teaching people to eat whole plant foods. So the calories are coming from fruits, legumes, whole grains, and starchy vegetables.
You talked about some misinformation, a sea of misinformation. Go over some of the most popular ones. You start off with the ones that drove you crazy, like is the fruit again. If you got some examples.
I mean, really, that's the biggest one. It really comes. I mean, any food, whole food, high in carbohydrates, being bad for people living with diabetes. I have yet to see peer-reviewed research saying that people eat more whole fruits, more whole potatoes, whole yams, whole squashes, that is associated with more disease. This is just not out there. I mean, if you go and look at the research, how many studies do we see where the title of the study is something about meat being associated with diabetes and disease risk? Dairy, eggs, I mean, those papers are all over the place. So just this whole concept that eating whole plant foods is bad for people living with diabetes, it's just, I mean, that's the one thing. It's really it. I mean, in the whole world of diabetes, you have a group of people, you have one group saying eat very low carbohydrate, another group saying eat very low fat. I mean, that's it. That's the confusion. It's like, should I eat these foods or should I not? And it can be so simple.
Even potatoes?
Even potatoes, absolutely. There's people, you could literally do a potato diet, which is very popular right now. People eat nothing but potatoes for like 30 days. And I promise you, if you're living with type 2 diabetes and you eat nothing but potatoes, everything's gonna get better. You're gonna lose weight, blood glucose is gonna go down eating nothing but potatoes. But again, these are potatoes that don't have butter on them, that don't have oil, whole potatoes. You can add herbs, you can add spices, but we're talking about whole foods.
What's up with animal products?
I mean, animal products, they're no fiber, cholesterol. It's a big problem.
Lean protein, grass-fed, massaged, sung lullabies by Tibetan monks, and that's clearly got to be okay, right?
You get all the protein you need from whole plant foods. There's nothing you can get from consuming animal products that you can't get from whole plant foods. The only exception there would be B12. That's a whole nother story, but you can simply take a B12 supplement and you're good. We run online group coaching programs, and we also do in-person retreats. And I can 100% say, I have never seen a single client come to us who follows the program not see dramatic improvements in insulin sensitivity. So for people living with type 1 or type 1.5 diabetes, that's super easy to measure. They're counting their carbohydrate intake. We can see how much insulin they're injecting. We can easily figure out insulin sensitivity. For people living with type 2 diabetes, weight loss, reducing medication, lowering blood glucose every single time.
When we look at the diets that are popular nowadays, one of the ones that has emerged is the paleo diet, which is really kind of a mythological, romantic notion for the foods that people were eating after the advent of the Stone Age, but before we figured out how to plant anything. So it's this sort of romantic idea of being in a loincloth as a successful hunter, not being a farmer. There's something good about that because it throws out all the ice cream and all the dairy products because that's much later in history. And it throws out sugary stuff because we didn't figure out how to cultivate sugarcane. So far, so good. But the foolish part of the paleo diet is that they decided it's got to be after the advent of the Stone Age when we had spears and axes and could kill animals and eat meat. The truth is our species goes back way before that. And whether we like it or not, we are actually great apes, like orangutans and chimpanzees and gorillas, and they are mostly or entirely herbivores. So they are not out hunting and roasting a rack of ribs on their fire. They're eating fruits and vegetables and shoots and leaves and that kind of stuff. And that's the kind of diet that keeps them healthy.
when the surgeon opens up the coronary arteries and removes this atherosclerotic guck that's sticking to the walls of the arteries and sends it to the pathologist, and they do chemical analysis of it, there's no question it's cholesterol and other lipids that are there directly from the animal fat that's being eaten. You can give radioactive labeled cholesterol in the diet, and it indeed shows up in the plaques. There's no question that dietary fat certainly affects the health of our arteries. And fat is not an evil molecule. We need some fats every day. Our skin oils are made of fats. Our hormones are made of fats. We need some every day. I'm not saying not to eat it, but the plant kingdom, in the form of avocados and walnuts and chia seeds and hemp seeds and flax seeds, provides all the fats that we require. We do not need to eat the fat of living animals, that's for sure. And because it seems like we in the West feel that if a little is good, more must be better. And so people will take some of these stories that, well, the Inuit, Eskimo folks, they eat high-fat diets, they're healthy. Well, they're not. If you really go up to Alaska and look at these poor people, they're obese. They have clogged arteries. And when you looked at the people that were frozen in the ice 500 years ago, they already had clogged arteries. And the early explorers noted that there weren't any old people up there because they didn't live that long. And all the examples that are thrown out, well, the Maasai people in Africa, they eat blood and meat and they're healthy, but they're not. When you actually examine their arteries, they develop atherosclerosis as well. These ideas that somehow that we're the carnivorous ape, that we're the ape who eats flesh, because that's what it's come down to. Every 5 hours, bacon and eggs for breakfast, cheeseburgers for lunch, salmon or chicken for dinner. Every 5 hours, like zombies, we're eating animal flesh. No other primate does that. No gorilla does that. No bonobo does that. This is not a natural habit for human beings, and not even mountain lions and tigers, true carnivores, don't eat flesh 3 times a day. They don't eat it every day, once a week if they can get it. Now, this nonstop flesh orgy, if you will, that we've embarked upon is toxic, and it certainly does spawn atherosclerotic plaques in arteries, leading to heart attack and strokes, because it spawns bacteria in our gut that the animal flesh summons up, and the waste products of these bacteria, called trimethylamine oxide, drives cholesterol into the walls of the arteries. Your house cat will never develop that disease. Mountain lions don't, but we simian descendants certainly do. And our human body are not meant to run on the flesh of animals. We've got fingers for peeling bananas. We've got amylase in our saliva for digesting starches. We have long intestinal tracts for dismantling leaves and fruit. Now, this is not a carnivorous digestive system or carnivorous body by any stretch of the imagination. And if you think our carnivorous teeth somehow, our canines, give us a license to eat flesh, ask your house cat to open their mouth and have a look at what real canine teeth look like. Your canine teeth are shorter than your central incisors, which should be a clue to you that they're not good for biting into flesh. They're good for biting into apples and potatoes and starchy roots, which is really what got the Paleolithic folks through lean times, where they were starchivores. They lived on the roots and the tubers that the women gathered up all day and brought into the camp, not the carcasses that occasionally showed up and rotted quickly from the mighty hunter parties there. So all the way around, this idea that flesh is good for us and fat is good for us and saturated fat doesn't hurt us, there's no question. Saturated fat raises your insulin levels and makes you insulin resistant. Now, this is not a good thing. And these folks on these high-fat diets find that when they eat a little bit of carbohydrates, their blood sugar skyrockets. And they see those carbs are bad, but it's because the fat has clogged up their insulin receptors so badly they can no longer handle the carbohydrates we were designed to run on. So all the way around, if you take the magnifying glass and you hone in on these various arguments, these tropes that are just thrown around on the internet, there's very little truth behind it. We need a little fat, but have a handful of walnuts, have an avocado, have whole grains, and these healthful seeds, you'll get the fats that you need. But this should not be a justification for eating a flesh-based diet, especially in the amounts that are being consumed. 150 pounds of flesh a year that each the average American consumes is a toxic brew. We never used to do that. Back throughout our history of our country in the 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, 1900s, we lived on farms. And you may have had pot roast on Sunday and fish on Friday, and that was it. The rest of the week, you ate out of your garden. You had cabbage stews and potato soups. You didn't go killing your chickens every night for buffalo wings, that's for sure. You run out of chickens pretty quickly. This conveyor belt of flesh that pours down our throat is an aberration. Since World War II, we got so rich that we can now subsidize the corn and soybean farmers to create grains that essentially cost nothing, that are shoveled down the gullets of cows and pigs and chickens to make these $2 burgers. But it's all a government subsidized illusion. If those burgers sold for what they really cost to produce, if they really had to pay for the water that's used and the soil erosion and the sewage mitigation and the greenhouse gas production and the sea level rise and all the health damage that comes from the arsenic that accumulates in the chickens, all the health problems associated with it, these burgers would cost $80 a piece or $100 a piece, and you would just have one a year, which is about how much people should be eating, if at all. But to think that this is the natural way of eating and this is the American way of life, we eat meat with every meal, this is a recent aberration in our diet, and it's a toxic one. And if someone asks me how to cause a colon cancer, I say simple: pack your colon full of meat 3 times a day. Let that rub on your colon wall for a few years. See what you set off there. The people who follow these high flesh diets are setting themselves up, from this physician's point of view, for an epidemic of clogged arteries, heart attacks, strokes, type 2 diabetes, autoimmune diseases, colon cancer. This is a diet of death. Plus, it's a totally non-sustainable diet. What are they talking about? There's going to be 7.5, 8 billion people on this planet by the middle of the century. Are they really saying if a meat-based diet is the best, then that's what our paleo ancestors ate, that's what we should be eating? You're talking about a flesh-based meal 3 times a day for 7 billion people. It will destroy this earth. It's a completely arrogant, elitist, non-sustainable approach to eating in general. But the reality of what it does to our bodies, to the animals certainly, and to this planet, make a flesh-based diet totally unhealthy and unsustainable. And I urge people not to be seduced by the siren song that you can eat all the steak you want. That's a formula for creating death and destruction in your own body and the bodies and planet around you. There's a lot of internet static generated about things like whole grain. Oh, don't eat grains, they rot your brain, and stay away from those carbs, those bad carbs. I really, there's a lot of confusion flying around the internet about don't eat those bad carbohydrates and stay away from those grains, they hurt your brain. But this requires some clear scientific envisioning of what we're really talking about here. To take that broad brush out, carbs, and slather it around, saying that it's the same effect in the body about whether you eat a piece of chocolate cake versus an apple. These are 2 very, very different forms of carbohydrates. And when you eat something like whole grain rice or barley or millet, it takes hours for the digestive enzymes in your intestine to seep into the grains of the barley or the quinoa and start digesting the starches and breaking the protein bonds. And the amount of sugar in the blood starts rising very slowly and gently, and it's fairly easy to maintain a normal blood sugar with whole grains. But you send those whole grains to the miller, where they grind it into powder called flour. At that point, you've destroyed the fiber in the in the grain, and the sugar is liberated into pastry flour, basically, and the starch is very easily absorbable. You eat that piece of cake, and that sugar leaps into your bloodstream. The retarding effect of the fiber is gone, and for hours your blood runs thick with sugar, and the sugar molecules stick to proteins all over the body. If you spill maple syrup on your kitchen table, you know how sticky things get. Well, the same thing happens in your body. You make your blood thick with sugar for hours. It sticks to proteins and congeals there, and your body heat oxidizes that sugar-protein complex into bread crust, basically. It's the Maillard reaction that happens in the oven when you're baking bread. Well, that happens in slow motion in your tissues when they're all full of sugar. And it ages and injures the proteins in your body. It ages the lens in your eye, setting you up for cataracts. It ages the proteins in your skin, and they crack and produce wrinkles and set you up for skin cancers. And very importantly, it injures the lining of the walls of the blood vessels throughout the body, in your brain, your heart, your kidneys. And this lining is the membrane across which oxygen has to go from your blood into your tissues. And if they've turned it into bread crust from all this sugar and protein, you lose the oxygen delivery ability. And so all the way around, walking around with high blood sugars is not a helpful thing to do. And when we refine whole grains into these white powders called flour, sugar, baked goods, etc., that's where we get in trouble. And it tastes good going down. It stimulates all those neural connections that makes you want to eat some more of it. I bet you can't eat just one. But the truth is, what you're really doing is aging and damaging your tissues on a cellular level that come back and bite you with bleeds into your retina and blindness and neuropathy in your nerves and heart attacks and strokes. These are the micro steps towards disease of very important organs. So all the way around, let your body get on with eating the fuel that it's meant to run on, which are carbohydrates. The mitochondria in our cells burn sugars. We are sugar-burning organisms. But eat it in the form of whole foods, whole lentils and beans and chickpeas and rice and beans and quinoa, and let these sugars and proteins get into the bloodstream very slowly and gently. It's how our system was meant to run. It's when we process it, when the hand of man gets in and starts refining things and distorts the food material into something that just seduces your tongue, which is what the food processing industry is about. Then you've been seduced and injured on a cellular level if you fall into that seduction. So you want something sweet, have a mango, have a papaya, have an apple, and then go for a walk. But don't eat things out of brightly colored packages and boxes that are really just sugar and oil and fat and salt and things that entertain your taste buds but at a dreadful price to your tissues. And so healthy whole food is the key to overcoming diabetes.
So obviously I took Mike's advice and decided to speak with Robbie, a tough case thriving with type 1 diabetes. Looks like a vegan approach and it seems to be working, but what about my favorite breakfast? I was hoping for some good news, and I remember something that Dr. Furman said. We can't just assume that if a diet is vegan, or mostly vegan, that it's ideal. We still want to optimize the glycemic effect of that diet and nutrient density. Coming up a bit later, you're really going to enjoy my sit down with Rip Esselstyn on the anniversary of 9/11. Rip, a former firefighter and professional world-class triathlete, gives it to me straight between the eyes. You know, if you feel inspired by any of these insights and stories of thrivers, I invite you to join me. Join this movement and consider supporting this mission by owning the complete series. You can reference it again and again to inform your own plan to wellness, or share it with a loved one to help inform their own plan. Getting back to the whole plant approach, I knew a lot of unhealthy, donut-eating vegans, that's for sure. I need to be sure I wasn't missing anything because I hear advertisements all the time for diets that work and let me eat all the foods I love. Listen to what Dr. Barnard said about that. Then Dr. Clapper sits me down for an amazing education on the road that's ahead of me. I couldn't believe how privileged I was to getting to spend this much time with these busy experts to guide my health. I'm so excited that you're here and I can share that time with you too.
So one of the things that I do is I go around and I talk to firefighters. You know, it's part of me giving back now that I've been retired from firefighting for close to 8 years. Is so when I go to different cities, I make an effort to go and try and knock on the door of a firehouse, fire station, and talk to these guys and let them know what I'm doing and how real men eat plants. Real men don't eat meat. And I educate them, let them know that, you know, whether it's red meat, chicken, fish, they all have the exact same amount of dietary cholesterol. We don't need any dietary cholesterol in our, going into our systems. I tell them about the weak fats that are laden in, red meat, chicken, fish, eggs. You got trans fats and you have saturated fats that we don't need any of. However, when you're eating plants, you're getting all these healthy polyunsaturated omega-3s and omega-6s that our bodies need. And so I say, guys, real men, they eat plants because they want to be around for their families. They don't want to keel over from a heart attack. I said the number one killer of firefighters in the line of duty, heart disease, right? It's not like you're not burning up, you're not, it's not, the house collapsing on you. It's not, getting into a horrendous accident going code 3 to the fire. It's you basically being a liability to your crew and having a ticker that gives out when you're flushing the hydrant, when you're pulling that hose, when you're, doing whatever. Because you're going from 0 to 100 miles per hour in the span of several minutes. And so you got to have a ticker, have a heart that can withstand everything that you're going to basically ask it to do. And if you're pummeling your body, your arteries, your cells with that red meat and that ice cream and that cheese and those bacon bits and that sour cream and those milkshakes for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, day after day, week after week, shift after shift, shift after shift, no wonder we've got a pandemic of obesity in the fire department. We've got a pandemic of, of heart disease, of prediabetes and type 2 diabetes. So guys, real men eat plants. And if you don't want to do it for yourself, then do it for your families, right? Set a great example for your families and the communities, because as firefighters, we are heroes. We're heroes. And so do it and be an example of what you can be for your families and for your communities, and then also do it because you want to leave the planet in a better place than when we got here. And we now know that the number one contributor of global greenhouse gas emissions is animal agriculture. The statistics vary, but it's somewhere between the neighborhood of 15 to 50% of global greenhouse gas emissions are caused by animal agriculture. Between the life cycle of these animals, it's just phenomenal what we're doing to the environment. So guys, whether this is for your own personal health, whether this is for the health of this planet, or whether it's because you want to be a better guardian to the animals that we share this planet with, real men eat plants. And we evolve as a kindler, gentler, better group of guys than guys that are just basically abusing and eating our fellow animals. So in 2010, I started throwing these Healthy Eat Immersion programs for Whole Food Market's unhealthiest team members. And over the last 7 years, Whole Foods has devoted over $16 million to somewhere in the neighborhood of 4,000 to 5,000 team members that they have sent to one of 4 immersion programs. Engine 2 happens to be one of those. And so we've now had over 1,200 team members go through a 7-day immersion program where we teach them from soup to nuts everything about this lifestyle. So we talk about calorie density. We talk about all the amazing benefits of plants. the micronutrients, the micronutrients. We talk about how to eat this way, how to set up an eating plan for breakfast, lunch, and dinner when you get home. So it's not only the why, it's also the how. And we bring in world-class speakers, chefs, fitness instructors, and it's basically like a big old boot camp for 7 days in the mountains of Sedona, Arizona, or Asheville, North Carolina, where we immerse you in this new language of eating plant strong. And in 7 days, we have people, on average, losing somewhere between 3 to 10 pounds in body weight, bringing down their cholesterol, typically 30 points, but we have people lose as much as 100, 110 points in 7 days. We have people dropping their LDL, which is the lethal cholesterol, on average 25 points. People bringing down their triglycerides, on average right around 26 points. People going from being pre-diabetic to being completely no longer pre-diabetic in 7 days. So they come in, they have a fasting glucose that's 130, 140, and they leave and it's under 100. So it's now between 90 and 99. We have people that have to basically be titrated down, which means to reduce, or taken off their medications entirely because the food is that powerful. And if you're taking your medications and eating this way, if you have high blood pressure, if you're pre-diabetic, it actually causes you to be dizzy and be a little bit out of sorts. So we have to bring people off their medications in just 7 days. And most doctors would tell you that's too good to be true. I don't believe it, but it just goes to show you the power of these plant-based foods, right? When you're powering home the strongest, most effective macronutrients. So you're getting plant-friendly proteins. You're getting these strong, healthy, essential fatty acids, the omega-3s, the omega-6s. When you're getting complex, unprocessed carbohydrates, our body's primary fuel source for our 100 trillion cells. When you're getting the full gambit of all these amazing micronutrients. And for people that don't know, micronutrients, they don't have any calories, but they really are essential for taking our health to the next level. So it's the vitamins, the minerals, the phytonutrients, the antioxidants, and the fiber. And most Americans are sorely lacking in all these things. And when you're eating the toxic standard American diet, where you're basically, you are shoveling down all the wrong macronutrients, protein, carbohydrates, and fat, and you're starving your body of all these essential micronutrients. So most Americans are getting a pittance when it comes to fiber, right? And fiber, it is only found in plants. And if you look at how most Americans are eating, 94% of the American diet is coming from animal products, dairy products, and processed refined foods. 94% that have no fiber whatsoever. I was doing a study for my latest book in Mesquite, Texas, and I asked them to write down the top 3 ways that they get fiber into their life. The number 1 answer was Metamucil. The number 2 answer was gummy bear fiber chews. And number 3 was plants. I mean, it's like, wow, what a wake-up call. I had one of the participants that wrote down that in the first day of eating this way, he'd consumed more fruits and vegetables than he had in the previous month. So most Americans, they're not eating plants, right? Especially in their whole unprocessed form. But when it comes to vitamins, there's only 13 vitamins that we need as human beings that are in food and that are out there. 13, and 11 of those originate from plants. They don't originate in a cow or in a pig or in a sheep or in a chicken. They originate in plants. Same thing with minerals. There's only 17 minerals that we need to get. 17 major and minor minerals. And they come from the soil. What do you think plays and romps in the soil all day long? Plants do. So if you want to get a first-rate, highly absorbable, highly retainable form of whether it's calcium, magnesium, zinc, iron, you want to get it from plants, your green leafies, your beans, your bananas, your oranges, all these amazing things. If you want to get antioxidants and phytonutrients that are there to basically mitigate all the oxidative stress that we are exposing ourselves to every day just by being human beings, then we need to consume all these plants that have over 25,000 different phytonutrients that can help fight back disease. Then we want to consume plants that have 64 times more antioxidants on average than animal-based foods, 64 times more. So like, this is the grand slam when it comes to all these amazing substances, and they're found in plants. You know, of the 13 vitamins I was talking about earlier, 11 of them originate from plants. The only two that don't are vitamin D, which comes from the sun, and then vitamin B12, which comes from micronutrients that come from the soil. And then, of course, fiber. And fiber is so essential for so many things. It's essential for basically ridding our bodies of toxins. It's essential for stabilizing blood sugar levels over the course of the day, so you don't have all these highs and lows. It's essential for basically, for us, being very regular, right? And going to the bathroom 2 to 3 to 4 times a day, instead of being constipated like most Americans are, and going to the bathroom once or twice a week, or even less than that. It's a very freeing, wonderful experience when you are pooping 2 to 3 to 4 times a day, and they're light, they're unencumbered, there's no strain, it's relaxed. And I've had some participants tell me that their poops are now faster than their pees, right? I mean, how fun is that? I had one gentleman that told me he no longer needs toilet paper because his poops are so clean. And I said, well, so you mean to tell me you don't use toilet paper anymore? And he said, well, no, I still do, but just to make sure I don't need it. All right. So he said that's another way you can save money, right? No toilet paper, but fiber, right? I mean, it helps to mitigate cancers, colorectal cancer. We're just now learning all about the microbiome, the amazing microbiome. That we're learning that now 90% of us is comprised of all these basically bacteria. 90% of us that live in our intestines, that live in our gut, our armpits, all our hair, everything. And one of the things that's essential for creating a diverse, very healthy microbiome is fiber. All these soluble and insoluble fibers. And most Americans, again, aren't consuming any fiber whatsoever. So, start powering down the plants, the fruits, the vegetables, the whole intact grains, the beans, limited amounts of nuts and seeds, and it will be a game changer like nothing else in your life. One gentleman who came to our Engine to Immersion in 2010, he was a complete mess. He was addicted to cocaine, he was type 2 diabetic, he was about 330 pounds, and today he is now a healthy eating coach for Whole Food Market stores. He's 155 pounds. He now basically is doing programs with rehab centers to basically teach them the most important thing. One of the most important things is changing your food. If you don't change the food, you're still going to be addicted to all this awful food. And when you learn to eat this way, you're telling yourself with every meal that you love yourself, that you care about self, you care about yourself, and that you're doing something beneficial for yourself. And these people that are in rehabilitation, in these rehab centers, I mean, a lot of times they're there because they have such a low self-esteem, they have confidence issues. So if you can be eating these wonderful, nutritious plant-based foods for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, you're making a statement to yourself every time you eat that you care about yourself and you love yourself. But this guy, I saw somebody go from being the biggest mess I've ever seen in my life to now being a shining beacon of what you can be when you transform what you eat. And couldn't be prouder and happier of what this guy has done. I've seen firefighters that initially were made fun of and as being, little girly girls for eating this way. And you couldn't pick a more hostile environment to try and eat this way than a firehouse, a fire station. Men, they so associate eating meat with their masculinity. And all of a sudden you say, hey guys, we're not going to be doing meat, we're not going to be doing the cheese, this dairy products. And all of a sudden they feel like you are taking away their masculinity. But deep down, what they need to understand is that, you know what? Indulge me here. Because what you're going to realize is that you're going to become more of a man. Not less of a man, but more of a man. You're going to be getting, erections like you never dreamed were possible. They're going to be like blue steel instead of being like, these little chubbies that were an embarrassment. You're going to find out that you're going to lose weight and find your ideal weight in very, very short order. You're going to find out that you're not a liability to the other guys, on your crew. Instead, you're going to be an amazing asset. You're going to find that your aerobic capacity goes up. You're going to feel better. You're going to have increased energy. All these things are going to happen just because you had the cojones to give up the meat, right? So on the front end, it looks like, man, I'm going to be giving up my manhood. But on the back end, you're going to discover that this was the best choice you possibly could have made, to become more of a man. And to me, a real man goes against the prevailing winds. And you do what's not easy. You do what's a little bit difficult, and you do it because at some point you realize it's the truth and it's the right thing to do. So I've had firefighters that have gone against the prevailing winds. They've done this, and now the whole crews are doing it. So one of the guys in my pilot study, a guy named Tim Bosma, I went through the academy with him. He weighed about 210 pounds. 10 years in the fire department, he had successfully gained roughly 10 pounds a year. So he was now 303 pounds. And he was part of my pilot group in 2007, 2008 for my first book, The Engine 2 Diet. In 28 days, he lost 33 pounds. His total cholesterol came down to 80 points, total cholesterol. His LDL came down into the low 40s. And in his food log, he wrote one night that for dessert, he ate a whole watermelon. And I wrote back and I said, Tim, was that like a little personal watermelon? And he said, no, it was a whole watermelon. And the reason I'm telling you this is because he learned that you could eat massive amounts of food when you're eating a whole food plant-based diet, especially once you understand the principles of calorie density. So Tim was just an absolute, he hit a home run, and he gave himself the opportunity to do this for 28 days. So I would tell a lot of the guys that are out there in particular, because women are bright, they get this, but men, as we've been talking about, they feel like their masculinity is being threatened. So I would tell you, give yourself the opportunity to do this for 7 days, for 28 days, and then you be the judge what you want to do on day 8 or on day 29. But my bet is you'll feel better than you've ever felt. You've been eating foods that you can't believe how fantastic they taste. And you're going to be looking better than ever before. So what's there not to like about eating this way? I also tell people that the only way I was able to get a bunch of Texas male firefighters to do this is because I fed them the foods that they love. So we did burgers, but we did black bean poblano burgers instead of red meat burgers on a whole grain bun with baked sweet potato fries instead of, normal French fries. We did fajitas, but instead of doing beef fajitas, we would do fajitas that are made out of either, butternut squash fajitas, portobello mushroom fajitas, tempeh, tofu. We would do them on corn tortillas instead of, flour tortillas that are loaded with, the wrong kind of fats. We would do casseroles. So we do sweet potato lasagnas instead of lasagnas that are stuffed with meat and and cheese. We would do shepherd's pies with mashed potatoes and lentils instead of ground beef. We would do pizzas. We'd roll our own whole grain crust. We'd do it with a nice healthy red sauce, and on top of that we do sun-dried tomatoes, we do artichoke hearts, we do mushrooms, bell peppers, onions, you name it. Instead of doing double cheese and pepperoni. How boring, right? And then instead of doing Bluebell ice cream, which is kind of the norm for the Austin, Texas Fire Department, we'd get a Vitamix blender or a Yonana machine, and we'd make our own ice cream out of frozen mango or frozen banana or frozen blueberries or frozen strawberries. So we do these wonderful sorbets. So when I went to Indianapolis in 2001 to compete in the police fire games, I'm pretty much sure that I was the only triathlete that was towing that starting line that was fueling themselves with the power of plants. Can guarantee almost all these other policemen or firefighters were fueling themselves with dairy, red meat, chicken, fish, eggs, basically weak fuel. And I'm sure that it was one of the things that gave me a leg up as a competitor that day to bring home the gold. So I would tell you there's 7 things I want you to do.
Okay.
7 things. The first thing is I want you to only eat plants, all right? Don't be drawn to animal products, to animal byproducts, to dairy, or the processed refined foods that are out there, because they're out there, and everywhere you turn, you're going to be they're going to be calling your name. So know that, you know what, that is not my food. My new food are plants. So number 1 is plants. Number 2 is it's got to be more than just plants. It's got to be whole plant-based foods. Yeah, that fun little bug. It's got to be whole plant-based foods. So can't be French fries, can't be diet cheese, can't be Earth Balance, butter spread, right? I want you to do fruits, vegetables, whole intact grains, beans, and for you, the only nuts I want you doing are walnuts because they have such a friendly omega-3 to omega-6 ratio. No nut butters. You can do a small handful of walnuts a day. Okay, so that's point number 2. Point number 3 is I don't want you drinking any calories. Right now, I want you only drinking water. So we're not doing green smoothies, we're not doing Coca-Cola, we're not doing iced teas, we're not doing alcohol, because believe it or not, none of those things are registering in your brain or in your tummy as calories. And so you will invariably consume the same amount of calories over the course of that day on top of any liquid calories you've consumed. So I want you to do what the other 50,000 mammals on the planet are doing and just drinking water, all right? If you need to put a lemon or a lime in there or whatever you can, but you're just drinking water. Does that make sense?
Yep, got it, water.
Number 4 is I want you to be mindful of calorie density principles. We talked about that a little bit earlier, right? So you're really gravitating towards the plant-based foods that are between 100 to 600 calories a pound, and now you get to eat basically until you're comfortably full, not worrying about portion control or counting calories. Number 5, don't for 1 second worry about where you're getting protein from, because it's there in the plants, right? Okay. Just like as a firefighter, I can tell you that air is 21% oxygen and 79% nitrogen. Are we worried right now about how much oxygen we're getting from the air?
No, I don't even think about it.
Not even thinking about it. I want that to be the same way you approach protein and eating plants. Don't even think about it. Just know you're getting all you need from your fruits, from your vegetables, from your kale, from your broccoli, from your beans, from your legumes, all right? So number 5, you don't give a fig about protein because it's there. Number 6 is I want you to start reading labels, and you gotta be concerned about salt, sugar, and fat, okay? Gotta be concerned about salt, sugar, and fat. I don't think we have time to go over that right now. And last one, number 7, is this body was meant to move. So I want you to, even if it's just 10 minutes a day, I want you to walk, I want you to do something, swim, ride a bike, garden, walk the stairs, do something, but you gotta move. It will help for brain health, for mental health, it'll help you for cardiovascular health, it'll help you for bone health, and it'll help prevent something called sarcopenia, which is the wasting away of muscle, every year after the age of 30. All right?
Wow.
So, those are the 7 things I want you to focus on.
All right.
Right? Eat plants, whole plants. Don't drink your calories. Be mindful of calorie density. Don't worry about protein. You got to start reading labels and looking for salt, sugar, and fat. And lastly, move. Move this amazing, wonderful body that you've been given.
You got it, man. All right. I'll be in
Thanks,
touch.
my man.
Thanks, man. Well, it seems like there's no way out if I want to stop diabetes in its tracks, reverse my complications, and eliminate all risk of heart disease. I need to be like Rip. You know, when I was talking to him, I remember my interviews with Dr. Campbell and Dr. Loomis. They spoke about elite professional athletes they worked with that moved to a nutrient-dense, whole plant-based diet to reach new levels of performance, recover quickly, and extend their careers, like Tom Brady. Well, I thought Rip and I are close to the same age, and most guys in their 20s would be lucky to be able to keep up with him. I was definitely inspired. I started to believe I might be able to do this and turn back the clock. I invite you to join me if you would. Join this movement and support this mission that will help the world rise from the depths of diabetes and obesity. Please consider supporting this cause by owning the complete series so you can reference it to inform your own plan to wellness or share it with a loved one to help them inform their own plan now or in the future. Your support allows us to stay on the top of research and spread our findings for free, like we're doing right now, or start some research of our own and keep bringing it back to you. Also, a portion of each sale gets donated to charities that are helping people every day prevent and reverse diabetes and its complications, and to find relief from pain and suffering. In episode 5, we're going to get to the bottom of how our brains are wired and they defeat us in this modern environment where we're surrounded by rich food. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next episode.